that we lights goes out. Hear a lot of mamas crying, people they steady dying in the city that we lights goes out. Popping out the bag, run these men like trackers, get these moves to where lights go out. You can see they eye, these niggas are spies. In the city that we from, in the city that we from, seeing crackers walk through the bump, young niggas stunning with the guns, mamas always crying for their son, same nigga acting like a brother, same nigga.
Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Anything Goes TV 817. I'm your host David.
And I'm Nino.
And that was All the Don. Lights Go Out. Shout out to All the Don and Clint, his manager. And I'd like to say a special shout out to all our loyal listeners. Thank you for listening, especially my homeboy, main man, Bruce, Luther, Axe, Mark, Juju, and all the crew, our boys on the East Coast, in California, Houston, Chicago. Thank you for listening, especially Tammy, Brandy, Kennedy, Kiara, Carnella, Amy, and Kayla, and all the rest of the ladies that I couldn't mention. Thank you for listening. Today, we're talking about Donald Trump. Guilty, guilty, guilty on all charges. 34 guilty counts. What does that mean for his legacy and his presidency? He's the Republican nominee, and he's going against Joe Biden. President Joe Biden in November. Now, he have been found guilty of 34 counts. That is a lot of guilty verdicts. Now, any other person would be disqualified for doing anything with felonies. I know that you can't buy a firearm, and there's a lot of other things you can't do with felonies. So now we want to find out, is there anyone that is above the law? Because we're finna find out. Nino, what do you think about this? Because this is really something serious. Are these charges serious enough to disqualify Donald Trump from running for president? And if he actually runs and possibly wins before these appeals are settled and he's found guilty after the appeals, what to do then? So Nino, what do you think about this dilemma?
Well, first of all, let's start with the three players in this political ball game. We go with Donald John Trump, we go with Michael Cohen, and we go with Stormy Daniels. Now, this started back before the 2016 election when Donald Trump was dealing with Stormy Daniels. Okay, now he wanted to keep everything cool, and the hush money what came in with, he wanted to keep it on low key and secret for the voters, so he didn't want them to know everything. Then Michael Cohen comes in the mix. He was the lawyer that met with Stormy Daniels, that gave the $130K. Now, to your point, what I think it's going to do, it's going to shake up the whole voting range, because, listen, if that was me, get that, I would already be in prison. But I just think really it's going to be just a slap on the wrist with Donald Trump. He probably will get something like probation, even though the charges that he's going through, he's facing 4 years.
That's true. Well, I'll tell you what, one of the reoccurring themes tonight you're going to hear is they not like us. You're going to hear that, especially when it comes to the law. Now, those 34 counts, let's just be clear. There were 34 counts. He was found guilty on all charges, and it only took 10 hours of deliberation. Think about it. 34 counts, and it only took 10 hours to deliberate. Now, you know the Republicans are going to say this was a partisan Democratic witch hunt, and the jurors were Democratic, and it didn't take long to render guilty verdicts on a lot of counts. And it would seem like it would have took a lot longer, just from looking at it. And we're not going to go through all the 34 counts. To me, that is insignificant because of the fact we're talking about, is there anyone above the law? And there has been a precedent set by the Pope because he's above the law of the earth, if you want to look that up. But now, let's talk about whether an ex-president is above the law. Okay, Nino, I want to throw this back to you before I go any further. Do you think there's anyone above the law, and if there is, should they be above the law?
No. And I'm glad now they're making an example. I even seen the other day with Donald Trump going plea bargain, he said that this is our Democratic strategy against him. But hey, brother, if you do what you done, you get caught for it, you gotta suffer. Hey man, I would have to suffer. So hey, nobody is above the law. So he even said now, by him getting convicted and sentenced, this will change the ways for presidents and all political people from now on. So no, nobody is against the law. And I'm glad they made that point, starting with him.
Well, it hasn't been proven yet. Now, let's look at what's going on here. Okay. The best defense is a good offense. Now, this all started back when Donald Trump was president. Mm-hmm. Now, he would say all of this was started to discredit him from winning a second term because he's saying that he was robbed out of the election. Now, I don't want to get into all of that, but remember this, people. Donald Trump is one of them, okay? Joe Biden is one of them. They from the same clubs, okay? So now, let's get that one thing straight. Now, they brought charges against Donald Trump. Now, let's look at the flip side of this and things that are not being publicized or not talked about as much. On the other side of the aisle, we have Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, who is in the mix of a court case on 3 felony charges, gun charges, and everything. Now, if we talk about credibility and different ways you can go after a person to bring up charges, they're doing this now with Hunter Biden. Let's look at what's going on there. Hunter Biden, this is out of his own mouth, he has a book out called Beautiful Things. And there was excerpts from the New York Times. And it was 7 takeaways from the book. And it talked about a lot of interesting things. And don't take my word for it, everybody. You pull the article, New York Times, and it's called 7 Takeaways from Hunter Biden's book, memoir, Beautiful Things, where Hunter Biden himself talks about how he's a crack addict, how he was doing things with drug dealers, having guns pointed at him, spiraling out of control. He even talks about how much of an alcoholic he was, how much that he drank, that he couldn't walk a block without going to the liquor store. He couldn't make it back home without busting the cap and taking a swig out of it. This is out of his own mouth and in his book. And it paints a picture of a out of control son. It even mentioned he had an affair with his brother's widow. This is in his book. You can get it and read it. Now, I'm saying all that to say this. He is in a controversy with some company out of Ukraine, Burisma, and where the Republicans are saying he did something wrong. And this has been in the news, and they've been wanting to bring it up, and I don't know if anything ever came of it. But these are things that could add up to a lot of charges also. And now you would have different things on both sides of the aisle because of the fact that this person who was unstable, if you read the book, he sounds like somebody in one of our families, out of control, arguing with crack dealers, smoking crack, drunk, having interdictions for this guy. He's living in a Super 8 motel, and all of a sudden this guy is appointed to the board of directors of some oil company in Ukraine, Burisma. What do you think about that, Nino?
No, Dave. I'm like where you going. I'm just going to ask you something this. Because I want you to bring my mind up. Doesn't Joe Biden have some hidden agendas too?
Well, our president have hidden agendas.
Yeah. I know he had. No, go ahead.
No.
Go ahead.
No. Well, I was saying, we were just talking about how people are above the law here. And I was saying now Hunter Biden is on trial and on some kind of way on a gun charge that he illegally purchased because he failed to mention that he was a drug user on his application, according to the paper. Okay? Now, he seemed to be an unsavory character, and he ended up on the board of directors of a company that's controversial, and the Republicans are jumping all over it. But this political thing that goes on, if you have the majority here, you can suppress this and that and the other thing. Like I say, they're not like us. Right. Now, back to being above the law. I want to talk about something else that keeps someone above the law. And this is what Donald Trump has in his, former President Donald Trump has in his back pocket. The 45th president. Yes, let's get it straight. He has the Supreme Court in his back pocket, the ultimate law of the land. He has a 6-justice majority, as far as I know. Now, these are people appointed by presidents. Most likely, if you're a Republican, you was appointed by a Republican president to protect Republicans when it comes down to it, especially a Republican president who appointed you. If he didn't, his predecessor did. And he appointed you because you share his core values, his conservative values, or his liberal values if he's on the other side of the aisle. So now, when it all comes down to it, the Supreme Court is not going to put Donald Trump in jail. There's not going to be any charges. What could possibly happen, we'll talk about that again in just a minute. But Nino, again, we're going back to people being above the law here. Donald Trump, the Supreme Court is the ultimate law of the land. And they make all ultimate decisions that has to do with things of this nature. Now, if there was no one above the law, we would have a partisan Supreme Court. Okay, we have one Chief Justice, and I believe 8 Associate Justices. And I believe Chief Justice Roberts is the Chief Justice, I believe. And he was appointed by the Republicans. And he has a lot of influence. So, Nino, again, let's talk about this. 34 counts. It only took 10 hours to deliberate. Do that sound like a witch hunt? Do that sound like former President Donald Trump was treated fairly? In your opinion?
Well, I'm going to summarize it like this. And this is what I was going to say, because you have said great and everything. I just want to ask the masses and the audience, after everything is said and done, when his sentence come and everything, what do you think Donald Trump, what the charge he's going to be? Me personally, I don't think he will get the 4 years. I think maybe he'll do 36 months or something like that. I don't think he'll get the 4 years, because you got to remember, when Michael Cohen got his, he was gone from May 2019 to November 2021. And Donald Trump is a former president. So that's what I just asked in my ending. What do you as the masses think if Donald Trump is convicted, what will his sentence be?
Well, that's a good question. The sentencing hearing is July 11th.
Right.
And I want everybody to make sure they go get that book, Beautiful Things, the memoirs of Hunter Biden. It is very interesting. From those excerpts and those 7 takeaways, man, it's explosive, and it should be a bestseller. I got to tell you, I seem like I know the guy. I tell you, with all that in the book, somebody in your family is just like this guy. Read it, man. You're gonna like, golly, Hunter, you just like my brother or my cousin, the uncle. Now, nothing's gonna happen to Donald Trump, because think about it. Who would Joe Biden have to run against? Nobody. Do you think that they're going to allow someone to run uncontested and win the presidency? Now, there's another thing I'd like to bring up too. We was talking about the past election. If you got beat by millions of votes for real, you know this. You know you lost by 20 million votes or something like that. I don't believe Donald Trump would have been acting like this. For some reason, because he's part of the establishment, he knows some kind of way it was some fuzzy math. Because he knows this. Because he's a part of it. He was friends to those media people he called fake news until they cheated him. And then he's like, hey, look at here now. I'm finna blow the lid off of this. I'm not gonna play fair and go home after a loss like, John Kerry and the other guy, Al Gore, whoever, back then, where there was some controversy about hanging chads and all of that.
Was it Ted Cruz? No.
It was during the presidential election. Right. Those guys over there in Florida, George Bush pulled out of the fire. But again, ultimately, the Supreme Court is going to decide this. And do you think those majority Republicans are going to disallow their guy the White House? Because basically, it seemed to me like the Democrats are running scared if they doing all of this because they know this man is one of them. And they must be afraid they can't beat him because from what I'm seeing, it's energizing their base, Nino. I've been watching the news, and it seems like the Republicans are picking up steam. So if this strategy is not going to work because there's no way he's going to be disallowed to run, there will be an election, and the voters will decide. So, again, is there anyone above the law? And I say yes. And if you look it up, you will find several people are above the law. I named one earlier. And now we're finna find out if there's another. Let's see if his political capital pays off because the Republicans have the majority on the Supreme Court and they will make the final decision on this. This is David.
And I'm Nino.
Tune in again for another episode of Anything Goes TV 817.